Welcome to the Thought Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Isabella Sanchez Castañeda. Let's jump right in. Welcome back to the Thought Leaders Podcast. Today, I'm joined by a thought leader in the branding and web design space, specifically for consumer packaged goods. I'm so excited to welcome Brittany onto the podcast. And I want to start with, is there a brand or brand packaging that you think of as your absolute favorite that you just adore what it looks like?
Oh my gosh, no, I can't answer that question. That's impossible. That's like trying to answer what's my favorite color. I like them all. I have multiple favorites. Like, okay, what's first coming to mind? I'm thinking of all those Target trips that I do. So okay, some of the brands that stand out to me, I don't know that I would call them favorites, but they've been like influential on me in some way or another. The Hello Bello brand, that's for baby products. Anybody who is a parent probably knows Hello Bello. It launched right around the same time that my son was born, so I was kind of like in that world for a minute. But their brand is so cute, and it's so like kind of irreverent and quirky, and so that's like a really fun brand. I haven't followed them for a while, so I don't know if it's gone more mainstream, but it was really fun when they launched. The Flamingo brand, those razors, they launched a few years ago. I saw it at Target and I thought it was like just really unusual for razors. All we had before we had Flamingo was like Athena. That was like the most glamorous razor, and it felt very like razory. Like you wouldn't want to show it off. Not that you want to show off your razor, but the Flamingo ones were pretty and they were like hot pink, and come to find out that that's all part of their branding, is that they literally are designed to look good on a shelf in a store and on your bathroom shelf. So, yeah, favorites, I don't know, but there's a couple that have stood out to me in the past.
Love it. And for the people who are not seeing the video, Brittany has a Pantone, like framed, I don't know what that is. Like, it's not a painting, but just different.
No, they're Pantone like postcards.
Yes.
Yeah.
So of course
Swatches.
you can't choose swatches. That's the word I was looking for. So of course you can't choose a favorite color, but those are,
No,
yeah, those are great
impossible.
brands. Do you think that it's because, like they attracted you because they were disruptive to the typical look of of other packages?
Oh, 100%. I think for me, it always has to do with aesthetics. Now, there's a lot to be said for strategy and voice and copy, and I know that all of that was in play too. But the first thing that you're going to notice with your eyes is aesthetics. It's the way that something looks. So like let's talk about Hello Bello for a minute. So they have like, a bunch of patterns on the diapers, and there are these monthly patterns. The only brand that was doing that before Hello Bello that I know of was Honest Company. And which is great. I've used them as well. And they just have a different brand vibe. They're more like eco focused and kind of like feminine. Hello Bello felt more like, I don't know, like rough and tumble, kind of funny a little bit. They had a pattern I remember that had like poop emojis all over the diaper, and I just thought it was really funny. So, I don't know that they were like a disruptor, but they definitely were at the head of the pack in kind of leading this, like, we can make diapers cute type of thing. I mean, diapers are not cute. Like Huggies, brands, Pampers, they all kind of look the same, but Hello Bello was doing something different. They were really colorful, which is always super eye-catching. I'm not sure what their like primary brand color would be because everything's kind of different colors, but maybe it might be yellow, which is a super eye-catching color anyway. So yes, that definitely caught my eye, like aesthetically. And then the Athena razors, again, it was aesthetics. For me, they had a bright fluorescent pink color for the razors, and that's what caught my eye. And then like Billy came along after Flamingo, and maybe it was, I don't know who came first, but Flamingo's what I saw first, and then Billy came out, and truth be told, I think Billy has the better razors. But anyways, So all that kind of look, like it's really sleek and kind of minimal. And I'm like, wow, this is like a pretty razor. I didn't know razors could be pretty, but this one's pretty. And the packaging caught my eye. Like Billy did a package. I bought a new razor. I did not need a new razor, but I bought one because Billy had a package that had like iridescent, like sparkly foil effects on their packaging, and it caught my eye. And I was like, $10, sure, why not? This is cute packaging that I literally threw away, but it caught my eye. So yes, 100%. Aesthetics are going to be like, I always tell people, there's that saying in food, like chefs, we eat with our eyes first. Like the food has to look good to get people to want to eat it. Your brand has to look good to get people to look at it and want to buy it. And like I said, there's a lot else that goes into branding besides just visuals. There's, your copywriting is what's going to connect with people. It's what's going to compel them to purchase or not purchase. But the aesthetics are what's going to get them to read the copy. So it's kind of like you need it all, but aesthetics are going to be that first impression.
I was looking into it because I was like, oh, I think Hella Bella was originally by Kristen Bell and Dax Shepard.
I think it still is. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it's like there's also something to be said for folks who are not trying to, and you mentioned Honest Company, like it's folks who are not trying to necessarily be the next Huggies, but they saw a need and they want to do it. But then also the piece where you said you didn't need to buy a razor, but just simply the aesthetics, the brand made you buy it. And I think that that's something we try to talk about a lot on, like brand is why we buy. It's the difference between buying, leggings from Lululemon versus a random like off-brand from Target. But what is like behind that? Is it just like, ooh, pretty, let me grab it? Or is there a deeper psychology to it?
Oh, it's deeper psychology for sure. I actually just wrote a blog post all about like consumer psychology and the different like marketing things that go into it. But at the end of the day, people want to feel a certain way about themselves. And if your brand can tell a story and make somebody feel a certain way, they're going to be like really bought into that. Like, have you ever heard about like romanticizing your life, where you like play a little soundtrack in the morning and it's kind of like if your life were being filmed as a movie, like this is what it would look like. We want that. Like people want to be surrounded by pretty things. That's why we decorate our homes to reflect our style and our personality. We want our coffee to be like a ritual in the morning. We want to feel I don't know what's the word, like high end. We want to feel something, whether or not it's high. Like for me, I want to feel like glamorous and like I don't like I have money that I don't have. That's what I want to feel like. For some people, they might like, oh, I want to feel like Belle in Beauty and the Beast with the ladder bookcase, and they just want to be surrounded by library books all the time. Like people want to feel a certain way about themselves, and your brand is part of how they're living that out. So in the example that you gave, like Lululemon versus Target, we might need to buy the Target leggings because that's what we can afford, but we want them to look like Lululemon. You might splurge on a pair of Lululemon because it makes you feel a certain way. And for some people, they're going to be like, I'll buy the Target ones are fine, but they look good. And some people are like, no, I want the Lululemons. I want that brand name because it makes them feel a certain way. It's the same thing like designer purses. Like you can get a purse at Target for $20, or you can spend like thousands on a Louis Vuitton purse. And yes, there's craftsmanship and all of that comes into play, but the brand is how your business makes somebody feel.
That's so good. And I think it's just really interesting how we buy into those things. This might be totally left field, but like, how do you feel about dupes and the whole conversation around dupes?
I love a dupe. Maybe that's not a great thing to admit to, But like okay, so dupes are a bummer in branding. Like if you have a high, like, okay, Lululemon, they they don't love dupes. Like yes, you can, you've got all the influence that are like, oh, get these leggings, the dupe on Amazon, they're on sale, like 2 for $20, whatever. That could be a bummer. Now I don't know what's going on in like the heads of the Lululemon CEOs or whatever, if they're like actively sweating that. I don't, I don't, I don't, there's like, all the legal things around copyright and all of that. But depending on your product, like dupes don't, they're targeting a different customer. So like I carried, this is embarrassing. Keep in mind, I was a teenager. My frontal cortex was not fully developed yet. I loved like designer purses. Like it was the, early aughts. We were all obsessed with the designer things and the labels and the brands on everything. So I was a product of my generation and I wanted a designer purse. I was like 17. I did not have thousands of dollars. And so what you did is you'd go to the flea market and you would buy knockoffs. And looking back on it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I must have looked so ridiculous. This 17-year-old girl carrying around this Louis Vuitton purse. Of course it's fake. It's not real. It probably looked atrocious. It's so embarrassing to go back and look at photos of me at that age with my like fake designer things. But the designer brands are not like, oh my gosh, we're losing customers to these flea markets, because the people who want to buy designer things are not going to flea markets. In cases like that, there's going to be just like a cost barrier that's going to keep your audience from the dupe audience. So sometimes I don't think a dupe is necessarily something to worry about. Now, absolutely, you should be protecting your trademarks and, copyrights and things like that. So there are legal things that you need to defend, but like, don't sweat it. And like, I do buy dupes on Amazon. Like, I love a dupe. We're all living on a budget here, So
absolutely. I get it. No, I just think it's so interesting from like that branding perspective, and you started touching on the target audience of it all. And tying that into what does the person want to feel. And there are people who may want the like luxury or the whimsy of having this really beautiful razor. And there's going to be the people who are like, give me the most function forward razor instead.
Yeah, like it's a razor. I don't care. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you work with clients to figure out like how their packaging is going to match that ideal client?
So what I like to do, I like to start every project with strategy. I have packages that I offer that don't include like a strategy meeting, and then the client just kind of fills out a questionnaire on their own. But what I really like is doing these strategy meetings with clients where it's one-on-one. We sit down for like 3 to 4 hours. It's a whole deep dive into the core essence of their business, like what makes them who they are. And when I say they, I'm talking about their brand, like, because your brand is separate from you and your personality. And I think that's a really important distinction that people don't always make. So if your business were a person, what would they be like? What would they look like? What would they act like? What would they sound like? We want to define like your core values. That's going to be how you act. We want to define your brand tone and voice. That's going to be how you sound. We want to define like the vibe that you give. Like, how do you want people to feel when they interact with your brand? So I think it's not just like, oh, let's make your packaging look pretty, because what's going to look pretty to me is not going to look pretty to somebody else. You want to make your packaging appeal, and it could be like look pretty, sure, but we want to make it appeal to who you're trying to sell to. And that comes with understanding your target audience. So you need to know them inside and out. You need to know like, okay, is my target audience a mom on a budget who is just trying to find like leggings that are going to last a minute while she's running from soccer practice to school drop off? Or is my client like a single girl who's, dating, she wants to meet a guy at the gym? I mean, I don't know Lululemon, so I don't know what they go for, but like,
Yeah.
it's like sexy. They give you like a booty, right? Like, there's a different mindset there. And so you just have to know who you're selling to, and make your brand and your packaging and your marketing and everything in your business appeal to the person who wants to buy your product.
Is there a story that you can tell about like maybe getting that wrong, like really thinking, oh, like our product is going to do so well in this demographic, and then it just being a miss?
I don't know. So when I do branding for my clients, I'm giving them like the ingredients to like go and bake their own cake, and there are times that like I'll give them like a packaging design or a label design, but they're kind of taking it and running with it on their own. So I don't always get to see the results of it. I'll say I've never had anybody come back and be like, this is garbage, you suck, I hate this, this performed terribly for us. I've never had anybody say that. I will say though that I've had two in the last year, which has been a real blow to my ego, if I'm being honest. One client I had canceled the project in the middle. She, for whatever reason, was just not connecting with the designs and told me in no uncertain terms that I did not know what I was doing and I didn't understand her, and she wanted her money back. And then I had another one more recently who I don't know, for whatever reason, the designs were just not connecting. And they ended up they hired another team to complete the designs and then bringing it back to me to finish like wrapping up the package. So that didn't feel great. But I would say in both of those cases, and in any case, there has to be clear communication between the person doing the designing and the client. I am always telling my clients, like, we need clear communication. You have full permission to tell me everything you're feeling. Don't hold back because you think you're going to hurt my feelings. Like, the more that you can tell me what you're thinking, what you want, what you're hoping for, what you're wishing for, the more that you can tell me those things, the better result we're going to get to. So I can't get into those clients' minds, but I will say that neither one of them gave me a chance to get back on the phone with them and clarify anything. So yeah, so, I mean, you can't get it right every time. And sometimes it's just more of a personality clash. Like, I don't know why they didn't want to give me the chance to get clarity. I've had clients who the design isn't connecting and I'm like, okay, let's hop back on the phone. Let's figure out what's not connecting. Is it just like, oh, we need to change the color or the font? Or is it more of like we need to figure out, like, I got something wrong in the audience. Like, I'm not understanding something. Like, getting that clarity, usually once we can like hop back on the phone and figure it out, I can nail it in the next round. So communication and clarity is like of utmost importance when you're working with somebody in your branding.
That's so important. And I appreciate you telling that story transparently, because I think there's a lot of cliche business advice of, oh, no, you're not going to please everyone, or there's going to be bad clients, but then no one talks about it and no one really shares it. So then the first time or the first few times it happens, you feel like, oh, it must just be me. I must be the imposter in this situation. And did you have a place to turn to, or did you feel like in those moments it was just lonely?
A little. Actually, I'm going to say it was just lonely because, yeah. So the first one that happened, I just got in my car. I'm like, I need to go have a pity party. And so I just got in my car and I drove around for like 20 minutes, just ranting off, spouting all the things that I wish I could say to this client that I couldn't. And then like came back home and I'm like, okay, let's deal with this. And then with the second one was a bit of a bigger blow to like my core personally, because it was like, oh my gosh, it's happening again. Like, is this a me issue? I think it's really easy, and I do see this a lot, like, oh, they're just a bad client. Oh, they just don't, what, they weren't right for you, whatever. And it's really easy to like blame the client. And maybe it was, like I said, they didn't give me a chance to like get more clarity even when I was asking for it. So for whatever reason, there just was like a personality conflict there. But it also gives you the opportunity to say like, oh, did I not communicate something clearly? Could I have made the client process better? Was there like a red flag that I missed from the beginning? So I think rather than just saying like, oh, they're just a bad client and I'm great and I know exactly what I'm doing, like, it is a good opportunity to reflect on ththings. And like, you don't need to like take that imposter and be like, oh my gosh, I'm terrible, I don't know what I'm doing, because clearly you do know what you're doing. You've hired or you've had other clients who have hired you, they've been happy with your work. Like, you don't have to burn it all down just because one person was unhappy. But it is a good opportunity to be like, what can I do to avoid this again in the future?
Absolutely. The hard lessons learned, people love to talk about them really in past tense and in hindsight, but
Yes.
not in the moment, right?
Not in it. Yeah. And that's where it gets lonely, is you're kind of, you know, you have this client who just emailed you and is like, I'm actually going to send this to another team because I don't like what you're doing. And then you get on like social media and you see all these people are like, I just booked a client, or I just met my goal for the month. And you're like, oh my gosh, everybody's successful and I'm not. But you don't know the whole story. You can't, you only see what people are putting out. You only know the narrative that they're crafting for themselves. um I haven't talked about these like two clients publicly, so nobody knows that that's what I was going through. So I'm sure that there are stories like that that I don't know that that's what they're going through. So yeah, it can feel really lonely, and it shouldn't, because everybody's dealing with something.
Mm. Yeah, and especially in we were kind of talking about this before we started recording, like especially when you're a solopreneur or when you're someone who runs their business online, there isn't that coworker in the cubicle next to you to be like, "Hey, have you been through this before?" And so how have you navigated just solopreneurship in general, in the good times too?
I think it's about and this is what we were talking about before, like, you got to expand your bubble, you know, like, I you get into an algorithm, and you know everything runs on algorithms these days, and when you're alone in your office and the only thing that's connecting you to other people during the day is the internet, it's going to serve up more of what you think or what it thinks you want. And it's going to serve up similar people to you. And you have to be really, really intentional about changing that. Like, I notice, and some apps are more sensitive than others, but like if I start commenting on too many other similar designers, like, oh, great brand, this looks great, good job, whatever, like if I start commenting on other designers, I get more of that in my feed. And I'm not seeing like my clients or like my, you know, other business friends or whatever. So, and it happens like so subtly. Like sometimes you don't even know that it's happening. And all of a sudden you've like gotten into this little bubble that you're like, oh my gosh, everybody is the same. And we're all saying the same things, and they're doing it better than me or whatever. And I think it's really, really important to like break out of that bubble, expand that bubble, whatever you have to do. And I know, a lot of people are like, well, I'm introverted and I just don't want to talk to anybody. And I would say I'm an introvert too. And sometimes I think you just kind of have to like put on a happy face and just like do it anyway, even though it's really uncomfortable and you don't necessarily want to do it, or you feel awkward, or you're like, what do I say to this person? Like, you kind of just, if you want to run your own business on your own, like, you're going to have to take steps that are uncomfortable and meet new people. And that's how it's going to grow. So, yeah, I think you just have to be really, really intentional about it. And then when you're done, like, go put your sweatpants on and close your computer and like close the curtains and hide in the dark and like recharge. But yeah, you just kind of have to do it even when you don't want to.
I feel you on the algorithm shifting. For me, it's not like finding other podcast people. For me, this will date the recording a little bit, but it's just been Bridgerton. Like I watched one meme and I'm like, oh, here we go. But then it's connected me to actually a lot of other business owners, because we end up talking about that instead of business. And then we're like, oh wait, you sell a service. What's up? And
Yeah.
so just getting out of that. Is there a way, like, outside of social media that you have connected with either business friends or those ideal clients?
To be honest, no, not yet. I'll say not yet. So I started my business in 2019, right when my son was born. Like, I started taking clients when he was 7 weeks old. So the first year of business, I was honestly like just surviving. Like, I was just trying to do the work that I had and figure out what in the world I was doing and do it all in like 1 to 2 hour increments. So it was really wild. And then, of course, we had like the pandemic and everything was like canceled and closed, and there weren't in-person things going on. And the world became even more virtual than it already was. And so I connected with a lot of people online. I've worked remotely since 2012, so I already was kind of like living my life online a little bit. But it like, I felt that like recently I'm like, my bubble is, I'm feeling the edges of my bubble, and I need to just switch it up and do something totally dramatically different. So a lot of it is dictated by motherhood. My son has been in school, or sorry, in preschool. And the preschool schedule is not always like the consistent, or there's not always like a lot of time. But as he gets older and I get more time back in my schedule, I'm hoping that there will be things that I can do in person. I live in kind of a more like smaller town, and so sometimes that doesn't always feel like there's a lot of opportunity. But there are the great thing about like small businesses is they love to band together, and so even being in a small town, odds are that you can like find somebody to connect with. And I know there's a lot of small businesses downtown where I live, and they've got, I don't know, whatever like the Chamber of Commerce thing is, or like there was at one point like I think somebody trying to start like a group of like meetings and just like hanging out and like drinking cocktails and stuff. So yeah, hopefully there's more in the future, but some of it just kind of depends on like life and circumstances and things like that.
Yeah. You mentioned like you started it right when your son was born. And something that I've heard, I am not a mom, but something that I've heard from a lot of moms is that their children change their relationships to boundaries in business. How was
Mm-hmm.
it navigating it at the same time, like figuring out business and motherhood at the same time?
Oh my gosh. I don't recommend it. It was wild. It was really, really wild. Because like it's not, there's no consistent schedule. You're not going to know when you're going to be able to work, how many hours of sleep did you get, when are you going to feel creative? Like, you don't know any of that, so you just I don't know, you just do it. I don't even know that I have like tips or advice or suggestions, because everybody's life is different, everybody's baby is different. But it was really hard, and anybody that's telling you like, there's those like empowerment messages, and yes, you can do it. Clearly anybody can do it. I did it, and it's not It's not like you need a degree or whatever. You can do it, but it's going to be so hard. And I think you have to really be determined to make it work. Like for me, there's a lot of reasons why my business was the right choice for me, and quite frankly, like the only choice for me. And that's what kept me going every day. Like when it's 3 a.m. and you're up with a crying baby and there was times that I was responding to emails while I was nursing my son at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I just figured out how to make it work. I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to be emailing my clients at 3 a.m. So I downloaded like a email app that lets me schedule them. So I could schedule my emails to go out at like an appropriate time so that I didn't want to field a lot of questions of like, oh, how are you doing this? How are you making this work? Why are you up at 3 a.m? So I kind of created those boundaries of like, well, I'm just not going to make it super obvious that this is what I'm doing. I also didn't want people to think it was okay to like, oh, she's up at 3 a.m. Like she'll answer this text. Like, so I wanted to create those boundaries of, no, you can email me between these hours. Like this is when I'll respond. I might be awake at 3 a.m, but I don't want to talk business at 3 a.m. So, yeah, I feel like I got a little bit off on a tangent there, but yes, motherhood does change your boundaries for sure. You have to, sometimes like you have to reschedule a call because the kid is sick or something, and that's a real bummer. And that's something that I enjoy about having my own business is that's how it's going to be. I don't need to like own up to an employer and the employer's like, why is your kid in the background? Like that's how we do it here. If you don't want a kid in the background, I'm not going to be the right service provider for you. I'm very pro parent over here. So if you need to like bring your kid on a call, bring them. Like, let's talk about Bluey or whatever. Like, yeah, you gotta find, and some people, they do make these really professional boundaries and they want to keep, their family life separate from their business, and they'll set up, offices outside of the home or whatever. But for me, it just kind of was all intertwined, and I'm like, let's just do it. It's going to be messy. And the other messy people will, I think it's like, you got to know your audience. And like, for me, I was picking the messy audience.
Yeah, and like in a way, right, kind of going back to the thing you do every day, like that is building a brand intentionally, and saying like, this is who I'm for and this is what you're gonna get. And obviously very different than a product on a shelf, but we are still aesthetically connecting with people on Instagram and saying like, this is the person for me, or this is how I want to feel when I go to a service provider. So Absolutely. It's really wonderful. Yeah. It's just great to have that level of transparency with folks. And so it's a lot of fun. But to the branding piece, what is the best way for folks to work with you? What are the different ways that they can find you?
So if you need branding, visual identity for your business, I am your girl. I've been doing this a long time. You can find me. My website is happylandcreative.com. I'm Happyland Creative on most social media platforms. It was primarily Instagram for a while, and Instagram and I are having a reckoning right now, just not loving it. So I've been like not on there as much. I'm on Threads. That's been fun. And I've honestly got like an email list. That's where I've been spending most of my time lately, is writing blogs and sending out emails to my list. But I am Happyland Creative everywhere.
Awesome. All of that will be in the show notes. And I do hope that people connect with you, get to jump on a call, see the Pantone swatches for themselves. And thank you for joining us.
Pick your favorite color.
We might not be able to. I don't know. I like the one little blue that's like right next to your head, but
yeah, that's a good one.
Yes. But thank you again for joining us, and hopefully we can have you on soon. Yeah.
Yes.